Imagine this. You are inside a cabin deep in the woods, miles from any town, miles from any road that is still passable. Outside, the snow is coming down so hard you cannot see past the glass. The temperature is 17 below zero. Your car is buried under 2 feet of fresh powder. Your phone has 1 bar of signal that flickers like a candle about to go out. You are completely, absolutely, utterly alone, or at least that is what you believe. And then from somewhere outside in that darkness, in that blizzard, in that impossible cold, you hear a knock at the door. You did not invite anyone. You did not give anyone the address. No living soul should know where you are right now. And yet someone is standing on the other side of that door, waiting in the middle of a storm that should have made it impossible for any person to be out there at all. Do you open it? People in tonight's 3 stories had to answer that question for real. And not one of them has slept without checking the locks since. Welcome back to True Terror Files Official, the channel where the stories are real, the fear is earned, and the darkness always has a face. Tonight, we are going somewhere cold. We're leaving behind every comfort and heading deep into the kind of isolation that only winter can create. The kind where roads close, signals die, and help becomes a concept instead of a guarantee. There is something about a blizzard that changes the rules of the world. It seals you in. It seals everything else out. And whatever is already out there in the dark, whether it belongs there or not, knows with perfect patience that you are not going anywhere. Tonight's 3 accounts come from real people who chose the cabin in the woods for different reasons. 1 couple seeking rest, 1 man seeking solitude, 3 friends chasing one last adventure before the responsibilities of adulthood arrived. 3 locations, 3 storms, 3 encounters that rewired every instinct these people had about safety, about trust, and about what it means to be truly alone. I want to ask you something before we begin. Have you ever been somewhere so remote that the reality of your own vulnerability hit you all at once, like a door swinging open on a cold you weren't prepared for? Have you ever been in the dark and understood at a level deeper than thought that if something came for you right now, no one would hear it? That feeling is what tonight's stories are made of, except for the people who lived them. It was not a feeling. It was standing at the door. It was circling in the snow. It was already inside. This is true. Terror Files Official. Tonight's cold is just getting started. Story 1 belongs to Rachel Dunn, a 31-year-old teacher from Columbus, Ohio, who took nearly 2 years to decide she was ready to put this into words. She and her husband Dan had rented a cabin in the Allegheny Mountains for a long December weekend, a last-minute decision made out of pure exhaustion. A mutual need to be somewhere quiet, somewhere that wasn't their apartment, somewhere the city could not reach them. The cabin was a standard 2-bedroom log rental, 40 minutes off the main highway on a gravel road. The listing described as seasonal access, and they arrived late on a Friday afternoon, just as the last light dropped behind the tree line. They spent the first evening the way people who are truly tired spend evenings, eating what they'd packed, sitting close to the fire, letting the silence settle around them like something warm and necessary. Snow began around midnight, softly at first, and by the time they woke Saturday morning, the world outside was sealed 18 inches on the driveway, the gravel road indistinguishable from the forest floor, the trees bowed under the weight of it, and Dan's phone showing a storm warning that covered the next 36 hours without a gap. They were not going anywhere until Sunday at the earliest, and Rachel told herself she was fine with that. They had food, a ceiling-high stack of firewood on the porch, and each other, and that was enough. She did not know yet that someone was going to knock on their door at 11:47 that night, in the full howl of the storm. slow and deliberate and even. 3 knocks spaced like a metronome, as though whoever was making them had been standing out there for a while and felt no urgency at all. Dan answered it, because Dan was the kind of man who answered doors, and standing on the other side was a man mid-50s, heavy coat, snow-covered beard, bare hands trembling in the wind, who said his name was Thomas, and that his truck had gone off the road 6 miles back, and he'd been walking ever since. Rachel stood in the hallway and watched Dan bring him in, wrap him in a blanket, put water on the stove. She watched Thomas sit by the fire, and she noticed that he stopped shaking within 3 or 4 minutes, far faster than a man who'd truly been walking. 6 miles in that cold should stop shaking. She noticed the way his eyes moved around the cabin in a slow, deliberate sweep. The way a person memorizes a space rather than the way someone grateful and relieved looks at a warm room. She noticed, when he removed his boots and set them by the fire, that the insides were dry. She noticed that his coat, layered with snow at the shoulders and across the back, had no dampness at the collar or the sleeves, the places that always dampen first when a person walks long in snow, because body heat melts it from within. She said nothing. She told herself she watched too many crime documentaries. She made up the couch for Thomas, went to the bedroom, lay in the dark, listening to the fire and the wind, and focused on the sound of Thomas breathing in the living room, slow and even, and absolutely still. The breathing of someone not asleep but performing sleep, with the patience of a person who has done it before. At 2 in the morning, she got up for water, walked through the dark entryway, and glanced at the hook beside the front door where she and Dan hung their keys. There were 3 sets of keys on that hook. Hers, Dan's, and a third, a single car key on a plain silver ring. Perfectly dry, not a trace of water or snow on it, hanging there as though it had always belonged. She stood in that dark entryway and understood all at once that Thomas had not walked 6 miles through a blizzard. He had not come from the road. He had been here within the perimeter of this cabin in some capacity, somehow before the storm began, possibly before they arrived. She woke Dawn without a word. She showed him the keys. They locked the bedroom door, pushed the dresser against it, sat on the floor together with their phones, watching one bar flicker on and off until the gray light of dawn came through the curtains. When they came out, Thomas was gone. The front door stood open. The couch was neatly made. The third set of keys had vanished from the hook. And in the snow outside, fresh snow that had continued falling until just before dawn, the kind that captures every impression perfectly, there were no footprints leaving the cabin, none in any direction, not toward the road, not into the trees, as though Thomas had not left at all, as though he had simply stopped existing. Rachel and Dan have not rented a cabin since. She says she still thinks about the third set of keys. Says what unsettles her most is not where Thomas went. It's the thought that he already knew the layout of the cabin before he knocked. That the way his eyes swept the room when Dan brought him in wasn't curiosity, it was confirmation. Story 2 comes from Marcus Webb, a 29-year-old software developer from Denver who described himself. In the account he shared with us, as someone who had always used solo trips to reset a person who found cities draining and wilderness restorative, who had done a dozen solo cabin trips in his adult life without incident and had never once felt unsafe sleeping alone in a remote location. He made that point deliberately, he said, because he wanted it to be clear that what happened during his January trip to a rented cabin in the Colorado Rockies was not the product of nerves or inexperience. He was not a person who spooked easily. He was not a person who imagined things. What he saw in the snow on the morning of his second day was real, and it was documented, and it has not been explained to him by anyone. Not the rental host. Not the local sheriff's deputy who came out and walked the perimeter with him. Not the wildlife biologist he eventually emailed photographs to, who told him the tracks did not match any animal native to that region and did not respond to his follow-up message. Marcus arrived on a Thursday evening in mid-January, settled in without issue, spent his first full day hiking in light snowfall, and his first night reading by the wood stove, sleeping deeply and without interruption. He woke Friday to find that approximately 14 inches of snow had fallen overnight, enough to erase his boot prints from the previous day's hike, enough to give the world outside the cabin a clean, blank slate. He made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the snow-covered tree line, and then looked down at the ground directly outside, and that's when he saw them. Footprints. Not animal tracks. Not the random pattern left by wind-shifting loose snow into shapes that the human eye assembles into meaning. Footprints, human in shape and size, deep and clearly pressed, with the distinct oval of a boot heel and the spread of a toe box, arranged in the pattern of a person walking, except that the pattern was not a line heading toward or away from the cabin. It was a circle. A wide, careful circle around the entire perimeter of the building, close enough to the walls that whoever had made it could have reached out and touched the log siding. Marcus pulled on his boots and went outside. He followed the circle all the way around, 70-80 footsteps, the same measured stride throughout, the same depth, suggesting the same body weight and the same deliberate pace the whole way around. The circle rejoined itself at the point where it had begun, and at that point, directly beneath the kitchen window, where Marcus had been standing with his coffee, the tracks stopped. They did not continue away from the cabin. They did not lead back into the trees. They ended at the window, facing inward. He called Sarah on the satellite communicator he always brought on solo trips, and she answered on the second try, and he described what he was looking at in a voice he kept carefully neutral because he did not want to alarm her. She listened. She was quiet for a moment, and she said, "Marcus, there's someone breathing on the line." He stopped walking. He said, "What?" And she said it again. Slowly, "There is someone else breathing on this call. I can hear it. It's not you. It's right there," and then the call dropped. He called back 4 times. The line connected each time but was silent, completely silent. No static, no hold tone, just open silence that felt less like a dead signal and more like something listening. Sarah called the county sheriff and requested a welfare check, and a deputy arrived 2 hours later and walked the perimeter with Marcus, examined the tracks, and took photographs. He told Marcus the stride pattern was consistent with an adult male of average height. He told Marcus there was no explanation for why the tracks simply ended at the window. He told Marcus that the access road to the rental cabin was the only way in or out by vehicle, and that the road had not been traveled since the snowfall. His own patrol truck had been the first to break the surface. He drove away. Marcus packed his bag and left the same afternoon, driving out in the deputy's tracks before they could fill in. He has never returned to that area of the Rockies. He told us that what stays with him is not the tracks themselves, but the phone call. Specifically, the moment Sarah said she could hear breathing that wasn't his. Because the satellite communicator he uses, the model he owns, is a point-to-point device. There are no party lines. There is no mechanism by which a third party should be able to enter the channel. Whatever Sarah heard on the line that morning, whatever was breathing in the silence between them, should not have been able to be there at all. Story 3 was shared by Jenna Mercer, 26, on behalf of herself and her two closest friends, Tyler Brooks and Kira Osei, all three of whom were present, and all three of whom have agreed, independently and without coordinating their statements on every detail of what happened during their winter cabin trip in rural upstate New York in February of last year. They had rented the property through a private listing, an older two-story cabin with a stone fireplace and a wraparound porch, set on a narrow road in a forested area about 20 miles outside a small town called Grover Falls. They arrived Friday afternoon, unloaded their bags, lit a fire, and spent the evening the way old friends in their mid-20s spend their evenings, music playing, food on the stove, the easy laughter of people who have known each other long enough to not need to try. The snow started Saturday morning, heavy from the beginning, and by noon the road outside was completely buried, the trees dense with white, and the whole landscape reduced to a silent, uniform gray-white that made the world feel smaller and simpler and entirely theirs. It was late Saturday afternoon, the snow still falling steadily, when the family appeared on the road. Jenna saw them first through the front window, a man, a woman, and a teenage girl walking single file along the buried road in the direction of the cabin, bundled in heavy winter clothing. She called Tyler and Kira over, more out of curiosity than concern. None of them had seen another person since they'd arrived. The family reached the end of the cabin's front path, turned, came to the door, and knocked. Tyler answered. The man introduced himself as Paul Holloway, gestured to the woman beside him, his wife Carol, and to the girl slightly behind them, their daughter, Bree. He said they lived in the cabin about a half-mile down the road and had wanted to come introduce themselves, welcome the renters to the area the way neighbors in rural communities sometimes do. They were warm and pleasant and entirely ordinary. Jenna offered them coffee, which they declined. He stayed on the porch for perhaps 10 minutes, made pleasant conversation, said goodbye, and walked back down the road the way they had come, single file again, disappearing into the tree line. Jenna, Tyler, and Kira finished dinner, played cards, went to bed. On Sunday morning, Kira was up first, standing at the kitchen window with her coffee, when she grabbed the windowsill hard enough that the mugs rattled on the counter and called the other two in a voice that brought them both into the kitchen in seconds. Outside, on the road, in the fresh snow that had continued to fall through the night, the Holloway family was walking again. Same order, same spacing, same direction, moving away from the cabin and deeper into the woods. Same coats they'd worn the day before. No bags, no vehicle, no indication of where they were going or why they were walking into dense, unpopulated forest in 1.5 feet of fresh snow at 7 in the morning. Tyler pulled on his jacket and boots and walked down to the cabin a half-mile down the road that Paul Holloway had pointed toward the previous afternoon. What he found was a structure that was clearly vacant, the windows darkened, filmed with grime. The porch railing collapsed on one end, the path to the door not only uncleared of snow, but carrying snow accumulation on the steps that was clearly days old, unbothered by any foot traffic. He cupped his hands to the window. No furniture, no food, no fire laid in the grate. A layer of dust on every visible surface that no amount of squinting could make recent. He came back and told Jenna and Kira what he'd seen, and the three of them sat with that for a few minutes before Kira took out her phone and searched the address of the property. She found a real estate listing. The cabin had been listed as vacant since 2017, following the death of its last owner, and had been on the market in various stages since then. She searched deeper. She found a local news archive, a brief article from February 2017, for short paragraphs about a family reported missing in a winter storm in the Grover Falls area. The family's name was Holloway. Paul, Carol, and their daughter Bree. Their car had been found on a rural road, engine still running, all 3 doors closed, no one inside. No tracks in the snow around the vehicle. Search and rescue had operated for 11 days before the effort was formally suspended. The family was never found. Jenna, Tyler, and Kira were packed and out of that cabin within 2 hours, taking the road slowly in the buried snow, not speaking to each other for the entire 20-mile drive back toward Grover Falls. They have not returned to that area. Tyler says the detail that stays with him is the tracks from Sunday morning, the Holloway family walking away from the cabin and into the trees, because the snow that had fallen overnight was fresh and undisturbed, which meant those tracks were made that morning in plain sight, which means whatever was walking down that road in the storm in the shape of a family that disappeared 8 years ago, it wanted to be seen. 3 stories. 3 storms. 3 encounters that the people who lived through them cannot explain and have never fully recovered from. What tonight's accounts share is not the horror of what appeared, it is the specific helplessness of where it appeared. In the isolation, in the cold, in the place where help is an hour away on a good road and an impossibility on a buried one. The blizzard is not just setting in these stories, it is a tool. Whatever found these people used the storm the way a predator uses tall grass to close the distance, while the prey cannot see what's coming. I want to leave you with one question that has no comfortable answer. If something in the dark knows how to use a storm, how to use isolation, how to use your trust, what does it know about you right now? Sitting wherever you are, in whatever light you have left on, think about that tonight. This has been True Terror Files Official, where the real horror lives and where we refuse to look away. If these stories reach something in you, if you found yourself listening more carefully to the sounds in the room around you, then you already know why this channel exists. We are here for the accounts that don't get told in daylight. We're here for the truth the darkness keeps. If you are new, welcome. Subscribe to True Terror Files Official and join a community of people who understand that the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a single account. And if you have your own story, something you witnessed, something that happened to someone you trust without question, something that changed the way you move through the world at night, send it to us through the link in the description below. We will read it. We always do. Till next time, keep your doors locked, trust your instincts, and remember, some things follow you home from the cold. Good night.